This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. Today we hear from Branko Terzic, Chair of the UN Economic Commission for Europe, former Commissioner of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and now Executive Director for Deloitte Center for Energy Solutions and Regulatory Policy, sharing really across the spectrum his perspective on the energy space. All that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. We have with us today Branko Terzic, Executive Director of the Deloitte Center for Energy Solutions and Regulatory Policy Leader. Branko, great to have you on the show.
Paul, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you again as well, too, here in Houston.
Now, I know our viewers would love to hear more about the center. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, the Deloitte Center for Energy Solutions was created about 2 years ago. I'm the first executive director. Annette Proctor is the full director here. We have a physical facility here in Houston and a virtual facility where I'm located in metropolitan Washington, D.C. The center we've designed to be a meeting place, a focal point for all the different aspects of industry, legislatures, regulators, industry executives, consumers, to talk about industry issues, to discuss solutions, and to discuss the problems. The center has programs. We sponsor 3 major national conferences, international conferences, one on oil and gas. That's happening this month. One for the global energy industry, which is always in the spring and May and June in Washington, and a third one in September on alternative and renewable energy. We also have webcasts, issue white papers, we focus the research, and try and provide useful information to the industry and to policymakers on energy issues.
Well, and tell us a little bit about this conference you have going on this month.
Yeah, Deloitte has an annual oil and gas conference. It's a one-day conference. We have speakers from around the world, speakers from North America. We cover both oil and gas and related topics. For example, this year we'll have Bob Lutz, who's the former chairman and well-known automobile guy, talking about the future of automobile industry, which is, of course, very important to the oil and gas industry. We'll have speakers on shale and all the current topics that you and I are familiar with.
Well, I've been impressed at how Deloitte has organized itself around the energy space, and tapping you to lead it I thought was a prudent move, because you have done so much, right? You've been the regulator, you've been the CEO, you've been the consultant. So we've got a lot to get to today. But maybe to start with your perspective when it comes to some of these regulated industries, looking at electricity, looking at natural gas transportation. What are some of the issues that you're seeing there?
Well, the overall issue there remains the one that has always been, and that is, how do we get affordable, sustainable energy to citizens in a reasonable manner, make it reliable. That's been the 20th century issue globally. And we did pretty well on that. There are about 7 billion people on the world. Only 2 billion have adequate, for example, electricity. 1.4 billion today even have no electricity whatsoever. And then in the middle, we've got people with intermittent service where the lights go out. in my 40-year career, I have determined the reason the 1.7 billion don't have electricity has to do with the lack of governance, the lack of regulation, the lack of the ability to bring the private sector in and assure private investors that they will be well treated. The best example of that is the satellite picture at night of the Korean Peninsula. The south is all lit up, the north is not. There's no difference in geography, no difference in ethnic composition, no difference in natural resources. The pure difference is the South has a good governance system, a good system of regulation and of governing, of bringing in capital. The North does not.
Well, let's go back a bit in that career. When you were FERC commissioner in '92, there was an Order 636. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, if you remember the period before that, the interstate pipeline systems bought, delivered, and sold gas.
Right.
And there was a number of issues at the time. We unbundled the system. We separated the purchase and sale of gas from the transportation. We changed the rate making to a straight fixed variable rate design. The end result was we have incented the construction of tens of thousands of miles of new pipelines. We have made the existing pipeline system much more efficient because the new rate design and the flexibility to move other people's gas allowed the pipelines to take advantage of physical opportunities to store gas or to move gas to just increase the utilization of the pipeline. And of course, the pipelines are profitable enough to they can attract new investment. It has also allowed shippers now greater access to more pipelines in more places. We have the finest gas transportation grid in the world, certainly the largest. So I would say on that basis, Order 636 was a success and it can be a model worldwide.
Well, and certainly we're a nation facing some pipeline debates right now. You know, we're looking at the pipeline from Canada. So I think it's certainly instructive for the viewers. And as you look at our nation, can you share some of your perspective, on what happened in the California markets with power not too long ago? Because I think it's instructive on some of the issues we're facing today.
Yes, California is being looked at all over the world, Paul, and I know you've traveled in your former DOE position, where many places in the world are looking at the feasibility, efficacy of having power markets. Russia is looking at introducing power markets. The European Union has a directive setting up power markets, and they all look at California, and some draw the correct lesson. And the correct lesson from California is if you design a market badly, it'll work badly. The wrong lesson is that you really can't have markets in electricity. And my proof for the statement that if you design a market badly, it'll work badly is at the same time in the period 1999 to 2002 that California wasn't functioning, an equally sized market, the PJM, was functioning very well on the east coast of the United States. The PJM had better set of rules, a longer history, and the lessons there is we can design markets that work, but they can't be designed by politicians, they can't be designed by state legislatures as the California was. It really has to be left to competent regulation and to the traders themselves.
Well, and looking at electricity, and we'll talk first about fossil and then about renewable, looking at some of the traditional energy sources, is it your perspective that we will continue to become more heavily dependent on natural gas, something that clearly is more abundant here in our nation?
Yes, we've had a wonderful gift, if you will, a gift of nature and a gift of technology with the development of the ability to extract shale gas and, of course, using that technology for oil as well. We will certainly be using more natural gas in the future for electricity production. However, many of us still remember when we had price volatility on natural gas. We have a unique situation now where the North American gas market, by price and by physical transport, is not tied to the global markets.
Right.
The other two global markets are Europe and Asia. Those two markets are tied to each other with LNG. And of course, the European natural gas market for Russian gas is tied to oil price through contracts. So we have this unique situation of what could be a global commodity as a regional commodity with regional prices. And we now have a very large price differential between natural gas prices in North America, Europe, and Asia, and that's not going to exist. That's not a natural state. Entrepreneurs, businesses, governments will look for the opportunities to take gas where it's low priced and move it to where it's higher priced to equalize. And we'll do that through possibly future LNG exports from the United States, which will have the effect of maybe equalizing the prices. And so my concern is, yes, we will move more toward natural gas. It is a lower CO2 emitting fuel, but it's not a zero CO2 emitting. Right. And we still, in many parts of the world, have coal, which we can talk about separately.
Well, and let's talk about coal and nuclear. What does the future look like?
Yeah. The fossil fuels, currently the United States is about 70% on fossil fuels for electricity. We have about 50% coal, 20% natural gas, currently 20% nuclear. The world is on coal at 50% or greater. Some countries are 100% on coal. China is very dependent on coal. So coal is going to be around for quite a while. Right. It is abundant, available, easily processed, easily handled. It has environmental considerations, and for that we would like to have some new technologies. I chair a United Nations committee in Geneva of 56 countries that are members of the Economic Commission for Europe, which is a regional grouping that includes the United States, Canada, all of Europe, countries, former Soviet Union, CIS, Turkey, and Israel. So it's a very large. Many of the countries in Eastern Europe and in the former Russian republics are very dependent on coal. They will be dependent in the future. And so we do have a pressing need to clean up the coal. Actually, the name of the committee is Cleaner Electricity Production from Coal and Other Fossil Fuels. And we can, for example, very quickly, we just had a meeting in November, we can very quickly reduce CO2 emissions by making existing coal-fired power plants more efficient. And it may be cheaper to do that than to do some other alternative thing. So there is a role for coal. It's going to be there. We do have the unknown of the carbon capture technology, which once again we can talk about separately.
All right, well, we've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with Branko Terzic right after this. This is the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com.
The future is here.
You can't see it. It's electric.
At NRG, we're providing clean energy and now charging stations to make the electric car a reality. Kinda makes you want a boogie woogie, doesn't it? NRG, moving clean energy forward.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show, continuing on with Branko Terzic, Executive Director for the Deloitte Center for Energy Solutions. Well, let's flip to nuclear and tell us, I know you've looked heavily at that space.
Yes, within Deloitte we have a book club that we, every 2 months we pick up a new book. Our most recent book is an excellent book on nuclear called Power to Save the World, The Truth About Nuclear Power by Gwyneth Cravens, who started out as an anti-nuclear protester 20-some years ago and did some research and has come around. We have about 440 nuclear power plants in the world. The U.S. has about 104. There are 100 and some under different phases of construction. So the world is moving ahead with nuclear, but not every country is. Germany, as you know, has decided to close existing plants. However, ironically, their next-door neighbor, the Czech Republic, is going to build a few new plants, mostly to sell power to Germany. And of course, France is increasing its exports. So there is a role for nuclear. Here in the United States, however, nuclear is predominantly owned by the investor-owned utilities. In the rest of the world, there's state financing, state support, and the government can take the risk. Here we have a different situation. And here I think we will have a nuclear renaissance if the first 2 units, which are under construction, come in on time and on budget. That will signal that we can build them on time and on budget. That will remove a lot of the, I think, barriers at Wall Street, and nuclear, I think, will have its renaissance. If that doesn't happen, then in North America, at least in the United States, nuclear will fall victim to the economic pressures.
Right.
It won't be regulatory or otherwise. But many people in the environmental movement who seriously are concerned about climate change and global warming have reached the conclusion that nuclear has to be a part of the mix.
Well, in our remaining time, let's switch over to renewables and energy efficiency. On the renewable side, what do you see as the future for solar, wind, geothermal?
Well, as you know, Paul, from your former position at the Department of Energy, at this point in history, the renewables still need a subsidy. They either need a direct subsidy in the form of government grants, loans, tax breaks, or they need an indirect subsidy in the form of a carbon tax or carbon tax on the traditional fossil fuels. Absent that, they will be very subject to the whims of governments and not subject to direct economic laws. I support some subsidies for solar and wind. I think we need to. We've provided subsidies for all of the other forms of energy, whether it's nuclear, coal, and others historically during their periods of incubation, during their research. I don't see any problem with providing some subsidies for solar and wind. We must understand, however, that they are supplemental technologies, that will use these technologies not to provide new electric capacity, but to reduce our emissions of CO2 by running the wind and solar and turning back our fossil fuel plants. But if we need new capacity, if we have new economic growth, that has to be met with conventional dispatchable power in the absence of large-scale storage, which we don't have. So there is the role, but we do have to understand it is supplemental, it requires a subsidy, and it's expensive compared to the alternatives. And we're a wealthy society. Some things we need to spend money on, and I think clean environment is one of them.
What do you see as the future for electric vehicles in our nation or even around the world?
In the short term, I think electric vehicles will fall in the category of special purpose vehicles. There are people today who are able to purchase an all-electric vehicle and use it for the range which it has for specific purposes. At this point, it won't be the universal family car that can take you cross-country on a vacation, because even if you're willing to do so, you're not clear that they're going to be places where you can charge it cross country. But certainly in the case of many families with 2 or 3 cars, an electric vehicle can fill a niche, will fill a niche, and that will be its introduction. Later, with the improvement of energy density in batteries, with the proliferation of recharging sites, I think it's a very viable solution to our transportation problems and issues. We do, however, transfer the problem of emissions from the tailpipe of an internal combustion engine to an electric power plant somewhere, and so we will have to ensure that our electric fleet is powered in the cleanest way manner, with nuclear, with natural gas, with cleaned up coal, carbon capture sequestration, so that we don't exacerbate the CO2 situation. But I firmly believe electric cars will come in the future. As I say, there will be special purpose vehicles, and then later, as their functionality improves, as the battery technologies improve, there'll be direct competitors.
Well, Branko, what's the future, do you think, for natural gas vehicles?
Well, I like natural gas vehicles. I drove one during the 4 years I was CEO of Yankee Energy and Yankee Gas in Connecticut. It's an excellent fuel, high octane, clean, easy to use. The drawbacks are the infrastructure isn't there. You're not going to find a lot of natural gas pumping stations. At home, if you wanted to fill up at home, you'd need a compressor, because the pressure on your natural gas system that serves your oven and your furnace isn't high enough. And then the third is the energy density. You do need a large set of tanks, and the energy density of compressed natural gas is nowhere near what it is for for gasoline, for example. Having said that, though, fleets that are dispatched from a central location where the tanks match the range is an excellent use. It's cleaner than gasoline, for example. It is a domestic fuel, has a terrific, and the pricing is very good. So I think for fleets, the bus fleet in Washington, D.C. Has natural gas. The entire top of the bus is loaded with natural gas canister covered with a very nice protection. And so I think there is great opportunities for natural gas in fleets, service vehicles, and special purpose vehicles. I'm not so convinced that it will be as viable for the mass market for the general purpose automobile. But I think if we capture a significant portion of the fleet, it'll go a long way toward improving natural gas sales and also in cleaning up the environment.
Well, Branko, thank you so much for coming by today. You're a great mind in this space, and I'm sure our viewers have learned a lot today.
Thank you very much, Paul. Delighted to be here with you.
And that concludes our discussion with Branko Terzic. This is the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com.